Hey guys, Dr. Childs here. Today we're going to be talking about the best type of doctor to see if you have a thyroid problem. In other words, there are many options out there for you as a thyroid patient, but not all of them are that great. I'm going to be talking about each of the type of doctors that you can see on the conventional side and each of the type of doctors and practitioners that you can see on the alternative or holistic side. And we'll be talking about the pros and cons of each one and really help you determine what type of doctor you should be seeing in order to get the best help that you can as a thyroid patient. Now, you probably already know as a thyroid patient that you're probably starting out in a difficult situation. It's really hard to get the right type of treatments. If you've been listening to my videos or reading my blog posts or things like that, you know that there are better ways to feel better out there. The problem is that not all types of doctors agree with this sort of philosophy, even though it's been proven to work and there's lots of studies which show that it is effective. That's just sort of the way that it is. So having said that, there are still ways for you to potentially get good treatment on the conventional side of things versus the holistic or alternative or integrative side of things. So let's start by talking about the conventional side of things because that's where most people start, and then we'll talk more about the holistic side of things as well. So by conventional doctors, what I really am referring to are those doctors who have a degree, either an MD or a DO. Both of these types of degrees allow the doctor to prescribe any sort of thyroid medication. They have a full license to practice medicine wherever they are licensed or whatever state they're licensed in. Now, having said that, conventional doctors tend to be of, let's say, the same sort of mindset or the same way of thinking. And that is both a good and a bad thing. In fact, they call that the standard of care. And what that means is if you go into a family practice doctor in, let's say, Idaho, you can know with some degree of certainty that this doctor is going to treat you the same as the doctor that you were seeing in, let's say, Florida. And that is because there is a standard of care which exists for pretty much everything that you can think about, every disease state and so on. And it's meant to keep doctors, let's say, honest in terms of how they are treating patients between different patients across state lines with the same medical condition. So there are certain standards which say, if you're doing this, then you're within the standard of care. And if you didn't do this, well, then maybe you were negligent and maybe you had a problem. So the standard of care with thyroid patients is that you test the TSH, you don't test any other lab tests, and then you use levothyroxine or Synthroid, and that's basically the whole solution right there. So the standard of care for thyroid patients is what I just explained in a nutshell. And we'll talk about why the holistic doctors treat much differently. But when you look at conventional doctors, because of the standard of care, you're almost always going to be getting this type of management as a thyroid patient. And that's because if doctors do something differently, that may put them at risk or put a target on their back and may cause some issues for them down the road. So this is why a lot of conventional doctors do treat that way. Now, having said that, you will find that some conventional doctors, those people who tend to take insurance, who are within networks and things like that, these doctors sometimes do treat thyroid patients a little bit differently, and I'll kind of talk about which ones are more likely to do that as we go through this list. So the first group of conventional doctors that I want you to be aware of are family practice doctors or primary care physicians, as they might be called. So it doesn't really matter what you call them, FPs, PCPs, family practice, your main doctor, whatever it is. These are usually the first doctor that you see if you have a health problem, and these are the doctors that you should be seeing on a regular basis as a patient, one that you have point of contact with if you ever get sick or if you have chronic conditions that you're dealing with, and so on. So the chances are very high, unless you are a little bit younger, that you already have a family practice doctor. The problem with family practice doctors is that they have a lot of things that they need to take care of. A family practice doctor may see anything from a newborn one day in their office to somebody with strep throat to somebody who needs to get their knee operated on and everything in between. So these doctors have a lot on their plate, which means that they often don't have a lot of time to study about the nuances of thyroid management or hormone management or testosterone replacement therapy in women and so on. These are a little more niche topics that don't really get touched on by family practice doctors, even though they can be great doctors. So often they are not the best place to go for treating your thyroid. The next group of doctors would be endocrinologists. Now, these are considered specialists. In fact, they tend to be specialists within the endocrine system, which means the thyroid system. They deal with a lot of other hormone imbalances and so on. Now, having said that, they tend to be some of the worst doctors to see because they are very set in their ways. So most people, especially if you've been in the thyroid community for a long period of time, you know that one of the worst doctors to see is an endocrinologist because they are much more likely to treat you exactly the way I described previously, which is look at the TSH and treat you with T4, and that's pretty much it. Occasionally you will find a good endocrinologist which will switch you from levothyroxine to Tirosint if it's not working, but very even more rare than that, they might consider adding on T3 thyroid medications, but it's very uncommon, which is why most people do not even recommend going to endocrinologists because they are very set in their ways. You'll probably have more luck with your primary care physician. If you have a primary care doctor and you're thinking you're going to get better care with an endocrinologist, that's usually not the case. In fact, I would say most of the time, people will have better luck in being treated by their family practice doctor instead of their endocrinologist. But we have other doctors that you can see as well, and I'll go through these kind of briefly because these ones are not necessarily that helpful unless I'll tell you otherwise. But you have general surgeons, which can prescribe medications and sometimes do. They are really only treat sometimes patients who have had their thyroids completely removed. Most of the time they get kicked off to an endocrinologist though. They're not usually treated long-term by the general surgeons. Oncologists, which are cancer doctors, they will sometimes also treat patients who have chronic thyroid conditions. But again, that's not really their specialty. They're more focused on other things. And then another one, which is kind of a hidden gem here, would be doctors who are OB-GYNs. So those are predominantly doctors who deal with female health, delivering babies, and then also female health as well. Now, these doctors, because they are a little more experienced in dealing with issues of infertility, tend to be a little more open to trying medications which contain T3. And that's because a lot of these doctors know, OB-GYNs I'm talking about here, a lot of these doctors have seen that just switching someone from levothyroxine to a natural desiccated thyroid can improve the fertility rates among patients. So a lot of these doctors have seen this with their own eyes, therefore they're a lot more receptive to treating with natural desiccated thyroid or medications which contain T3 because of its impact on fertility. That's not every single one though, but you might find success if you can't get your endocrinologist to work with you or your family practice doctor to work with you. You might consider going to your OBGYN and considering that as well. A couple other mentions here, even though they're, we'll just mention these out, and that includes nurse practitioners and PAs. So you may find some success in getting treated by a nurse practitioner and a PA. I think nurse practitioners can be really good if they're on their own and they're doing more and they're focusing more on integrative or functional medicine. If you find an NP and they're in a family practice or something like that, then they're probably going to treat the same way that the doctor does, but your mileage may vary, so it's worth looking into. The same thing is usually true of PAs. Since they are practicing under the license of the doctor who is in their same group, then they generally are going to prescribe in the same way that that doctor recommends because they have to approve on that. So again, you might find some success with them because they tend to be a little more open to at least discussion on various topics, but for the most part, they're probably going to treat the same way as most of these other conventional doctors here. So that leads us to the next group of doctors, and this includes the alternative doctors and holistic doctors. So this is a big old net and a big old group of different type of doctors and specialties that I'm going to talk about and say why I think they're beneficial, and if they have potential problems, we'll talk about that as well. Now, what you do need to know is that alternative doctors and holistic doctors, they tend to have a little more of a open mind when it comes to treating hormone imbalances, using supplements and natural therapies, and so on. So these tend to be the best doctors for thyroid patients to see for those reasons. It doesn't guarantee that because you're seeing one that you will feel better or you'll get everything that you need, but you're much more likely if you are seeing a doctor within this group of specialties that you'll get better help than you would from the conventional side of things. Now, the downside to these type of doctors, we'll talk about it in a minute when we talk about insurance versus cash pay, because that does play a role as well. So let's start in the very beginning, and that is that you should be looking for an MD or a DO in this group as well. So you'll find a lot of practitioners, including health coaches and chiropractors and so on, and we'll mention these in just a minute. Now, some of these things, such as naturopaths, they have the potential to prescribe medications, but chiropractors and health coaches cannot. So as a thyroid patient, it's very important for you to find somebody who can treat you, who can prescribe thyroid medications. These are prescription medications, which means that whoever you are seeing must be licensed to prescribe and licensed to treat medicine or licensed to practice medicine. So in that case, you want to be seeing someone who is an MD or a DO and sometimes naturopaths, depending on which state that you are in. Under that umbrella, you then want to look for doctors who specialize in three main areas, and I think you'll find the best luck with these three. And that includes integrative medicine, which is like a fellowship that you can take after residency, functional medicine, which is a group of classes that you can take which educates you along these lines, a different way of viewing and treating the body and hormone systems as well, and anti-aging medicine. So these are doctors that specialize in using hormones, especially bioidentical hormones, to help treat and reverse the aging process, or at least try to help you age gracefully over time. These doctors tend to be much more up to date with the current science and literature as it suggests, and as it's used to treat these various types of conditions, including thyroid hormone conditions, hormone imbalances, menopause, low testosterone, especially in women, and so on. So you have the best luck looking or seeing these type of doctors if you're looking to get better treatment for your thyroid. You might also look for doctors who specialize in bioidentical hormone management or hormone therapy in general. This doesn't mean that they have to do only that, but if they have some sort of advertisement which says that they focus on hormone therapy, then that might also be a good type of doctor to see, because most of the doctors, if you see family practice or endocrinologists or things like that, they're not going to advertise hormone management in any way, because that's just sort of implied in terms of what they do. So if you see somebody who's talking about hormone management, that's also probably a good sign. You might also find success in seeing naturopaths. Now, naturopaths tend to be really good. I have a lot of naturopathic friends, and they're practicing in Arizona and so on, and they're really good. I think they're actually really good practitioners in general. But one of the main issues with naturopaths is that they cannot prescribe medications in every state. So last I looked, they were allowed to prescribe in something like 15 or 16 states. So if you happen to be in one of those states, I don't know them all off the top of my head, by the way, but I do have them on my website, so you can go look that up. Or you can look it up elsewhere as well. But if you happen to be in one of the states where a naturopath can prescribe thyroid medication, they are very likely to be able to treat you to give you natural desiccated thyroid. They're more inclined to use T3 medications and so on. So if you can see a naturopath and they can prescribe, definitely go for that if it's a possibility. Even if it's not a possibility and they cannot prescribe medications, they can still be very valuable in helping you determine what type of things that you need, what type of supplements you should be using, what type of diet you should have, and so on. So they still can have value even if they cannot prescribe thyroid medications. Next on the list would be chiropractors. So chiropractors, again, like some naturopaths, they cannot prescribe medications, but they can also help direct you sometimes, depending on what they specialize in and how good they are at that particular specialty. So not all chiropractors tend to focus on thyroid management, but there are a handful that do, and they can be good provided you go to the right ones. Another type of practitioner that you can see would be a health coach. Again, health coaches cannot prescribe thyroid medication, but they can definitely help you with lifestyle things, including things like changing your diet, detoxification routines, figuring out what type of supplements you need to take. Some of them can even order lab tests, although I don't believe that they can interpret them, and so on. So there are some things that health coaches can do as well, and they're a great asset if you're using them in conjunction with something like a family practice doctor or an endocrinologist. You can use these two together, and the health coach can kind of give some input on maybe what you're missing on the other side of things with the family practice doctor or endocrinologist. So these are the alternative doctors and holistic doctors, but I would say the best for thyroid patients would be try to find someone, an MD or a DO that specializes in integrative medicine, functional medicine, or anti-aging medicine. You'll find the best bang for your buck there. But let's talk a little bit about insurance versus cash pay. So one of the big problems about using these doctors, even though they tend to be the best, and here I'm talking about the integrative and holistic more based doctors, they tend to not accept insurance. In fact, I don't believe insurance covers most of the visits that they see. Therefore, it must come out of your pocket in the form of cash, which means they tend to be much more expensive. So even though they are better, they tend to be expensive. And this leads a lot of people down the conventional route. They're trying to see family practice doctors and endocrinologists, maybe OBGYNs and so on, because they tend to be covered under insurance. Now, there is a tendency for a lot of thyroid patients to push towards the conventional route simply because that's kind of where their mind leads them, and maybe they feel that it's cheaper or whatever. But I would caution you about going that route if it's all about, or if money or the price is one of your primary interests. And that is because the potential downside of not getting your thyroid treated correctly may result in things like weight gain, increasing your risk of heart attack and causing high cholesterol and obesity and all sorts of increasing your risk of diabetes and so on down the road, that any money you may save in the short term, you're most likely to make up in the long term with all those added expenses and medications and costs going to the hospital and so on. So do keep that in mind as you weigh the pros and cons and the cost of these different things. I don't have a pony in the race. I'm just interested in helping you feel better, but I would consider that as you make your decision, as you think about it. Now, another thing worth considering is where you live. It may not even be possible for you to find somebody who focuses on anti-aging medicine or integrative medicine because you just don't live near anyone who does this. In which case, you might really consider traveling to somebody who is somewhat near you. You may even have to fly. In fact, when I was practicing in Arizona, I would have people fly from many different states in to come get treated, including other countries as well. And that's just because it was that important to them. So if there's a will, there's a way. And I would recommend that if possible, you do get treated so that you feel better. There's no money or price that you can put on your health long term. And so that's what I would leave you with as you think about that. So if you have any questions about what type of doctors you should or shouldn't be seeing, or you have any other type of doctor that you want to add to this list, let me know in the comment sections below. Otherwise, that's all I have for you guys today. And if you haven't already, make sure that you download my free thyroid PDF resources. I have tons of information, tons of resources, all designed to help thyroid patients just like you feel better. So that's all I have for you guys today. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one.